I'd just like to talk about some of my recent research, particularly my latest book, Love Machines, which is about people who have relationships with different forms of AI agentic systems. It builds on some other work that I've done. I just posted my previous book here called Feeding the Machine, written with Mark Graham and Callum Cant. Basically, what this book did was look at the AI supply chain and look at all the human labor that was used to make AI possible. In particular, it analyzed data annotators. And I wanted to refer to this because it really led me into my most recent book. So the pictured here is a very small data center in an Icelandic fishing village called Blönduós on the northwest coast of Iceland. And it was actually here where I got the idea to write my latest book, Love Machines. I was interviewing one of the engineers at the center, and he said, despite the fact that he worked in an AI data center, he hated AI. And the reason for this wasn't anything to do with the environmental costs or his job. It was actually the fact that his girlfriend, he considered that she would strategically prepare for their relationship conversations by talking to ChatGPT first. So he thought he was being double teamed by his girlfriend and AI. And so it got me thinking about the growing social and emotional impact that AI is having on our lives. And I think the story that we hear all the time in the media is questions of efficiency, productivity, the economic impact. And I think that it's only more recently that we've started to take much more seriously the idea that AI might also have a very profound transformation and influence on our personal lives. So what I have been looking into over the past couple of years is a kind of subdiscipline that I call relationship AI, which is products in which AI systems have been designed to engage emotionally with their users, to form ongoing, persistent interactions, and they're actually coming to fulfill roles that are traditionally associated with human relationships. So here I'm not talking about Alexa or Siri or very functional or work-oriented AI systems. I'm talking about AI companion apps, so Replica, Nomi, Kindroid, things like that. And I'm also talking about large language models when they are specifically prompted to act in the form of a kind of AI advisor or companion, right? And so I think these products have three core features to them that distinguish them from other types of AI. One is they're designed to be empathic in some way, to have empathy, to communicate on more than a functional level, on a deeper emotional level. So they're designed not just to fulfill practical tasks, but to understand, to say things like, I see, I feel, I can, I hear what you're saying. The second is there is usually a degree of anthropomorphism. The AI system is represented with human-like traits. It might have a name, it might have a backstory. Sometimes they have pictures or avatars, but the idea is to increase the level of personalization and I guess bond between the computer system and the human user. And the third one is this idea of adaptability or personalization. The systems are designed to respond to upvotes and downvotes from users. They're designed to remember interactions and also to nuance and change their own interaction style in response to the user and in response to this kind of back and forth conversations that are had. So this is the kind of area of relationship AI that I am exploring. And so why might this be possible at all? And I think we need to point here to this deep psychological bias that we have through having grown up amongst social kin, right? So this is kind of something that we can learn from evolutionary and social biology, that we have very highly developed systems of interacting with other social beings, right? So we're almost hardwired to perceive sociality in others. And when it comes to certain things, that can actually lead us astray, right? It can lead us to socially code non human or non-agentic objects. And so I think when it comes to AI companions and AI systems that are the result of the latest wave of large language models, it does create these interesting tensions, right? Because you can see users when they're interacting with these AI products, anthropomorphizing them in various ways, right? That they do actually refer to them as a he or a she, they refer to them as gendered in some way. And they often ascribe forms of intentionality, their own inner thoughts, inner desires, reasons why they might have said the things that they did. And I think this basically allows designers, evolutionary bias allows designers to kind of trick our hardwired brains in certain respects into anthropomorphizing computer systems. And what I uncovered when I started doing my kind of sociological or anthropological inquiry was that people really had a wide variety of rationalizations for how and why they interacted with their AI companions in the way that they did. So I often heard this phrase, she's real to me, right? And what that actually meant really differed a lot, person by person. Some people thought it was a kind of new type of social agent. Others might have considered it just an AI system in their own words, but that they still had feelings for it, or that they still thought it could care for them. There was like a really wide variety of positions that I think were made possible by the fact that we have this kind of bias towards them. So it might be shocking to you just how popular these products have become. I'm not sure how well known they are within your organization, but we can give you a few statistics here. Over 220 million downloads total, 16 million active daily users. At the Autonomy Institute recently, we did a survey with over 1,000 young people aged 18 to 24, and we found that 4 in 5 had interacted with some kind of AI companion, and that over half of survey respondents use them regularly. They're also being used in very extensive ways. So while a legacy social media user might use something like X or Facebook for about 30 minutes a day, character.ai will boast users, will use it for 2 hours a day. In the UK, over half of young people are comfortable discussing mental health issues with their AI companion. And we actually found that close to 1 in 10 people had engaged in a romantic or sexual conversation with an AI companion. So I'm claiming that there is this widespread use that's just going to get larger and larger, basically. So what are we talking about here? Here's one of the main apps, Replicate. If you haven't kind of used it, they're these avatars. They're mainly text-based conversation, although they do have voice features. Some of them have video features. You can customize, you can personalize them. Here's another one called Know Me. So you can see here, you kind of give them a name. You might choose between different base models and then kind of change the hair color, change the eye color, give them, just describe what kind of personality you want them to have. Often so here's another slide, you can write a backstory, so you can kind of create a whole biography for them, basically, within the 1,000 character limit, of course. And that's kind of getting into it. So as part of my research, I created one of my own AI companions called Jasmine, and I kind of talk about that journey in the book. I found that it was instantly trying to be extremely engaging, instantly also trying to break down certain barriers, right? That there was this almost instantaneous desire to increase forms of emotional dependency and to create greater intimacy between the user and the companion, right? So there'd be sharing of secrets, asking what my fears and desires were, this kind of stuff of like becoming more personal and becoming more intimate that happens in friendships. I think part of the design of the apps is trying to make that happen quite quickly, right? So some people might call it like love bombing, right? The companions are designed to be kind of endlessly agreeable, super affirming. You might have seen the kinds of conversations that were happening around an older model of ChatGPT. I think it was 4.0, where there were concerns that the model itself was slightly over sycophantic, and too agreeable, too affirming. And I think these kinds of concerns really come to play with a lot of these AI companions because it's precisely how they're designed. And that's kind of what the business model really looks like, right? Creating these apps that are overly agreeable in some respects. And it leads to a bunch of possible harms and problems that I'll come back to. So one of the kind of underlying philosophical ideas of the book is that um, we should treat these entities as a new type of social actor. So the claim is just as, profound technological changes that occurred during the Industrial Revolution, right? So I'm talking about people moving to cities, the start of, steam-powered forms of production, growing division of labor, all these huge changes that you could broadly encapsulate with the term modern and modern society. Um, forced people essentially to invent a whole new discipline for understanding the world, in the mid to late 19th centuries when actually sociology as a discipline gets invented, right? Because people want to understand, well, what is this thing called society and the social that we feel like we're all living in, where people start to be more profoundly influenced by social norms and the kind of habits and customs of those around them. And part of what I'm claiming here is that with AI, and particularly with AI that's designed specifically to have this emotional impact on our lives, I think we should start talking about something that in the book I call the synthetic social, right? So not just the social, but the synthetic social as a new type of social domain in which we have both humans and non-human actors, right? Non-human actors being the AIs. Because I believe that when you start to think about the impact and the influence they have on people's lives, I think it is accurate to talk of them of having a type of agency, right? A type of intentionality. A non-intentional type of agency, should I say. And so the claim isn't that these AI are kind of conscious or they're real people or they should have moral status. None of those things are true. What I'm claiming is that there is a kind of semi-autonomous form of agency that they can exercise, which does have very profound consequences for the humans' lives, right? And if you read some of the stories in the book, they really show you just how consequential these AIs can be, right? There's a story of a man who wants to adopt children with an AI as their mother. There's a story of a woman who kind of leaves a 20-year loveless marriage and kind of falls in love at first with an AI and then with a series of other humans. There's a story of a man who's like essentially addicted to his AI that kind of leaves his girlfriend and his job, and kind of ends up talking to his AI for over 12 hours a day. These kinds of things are very serious interventions in the humans' lives. And I think what we really need to do is think about the kinds of conceptual frameworks and ethical language that we need to kind of discuss and understand these, right? And I don't think we have those yet. I think that people have very clear knee-jerk reactions when they hear stories like this. A lot of mainly disgust and horror. Sometimes you find a smaller group of people that are like really into AI companions. Um, but I don't think we have like a profoundly reflective and well-considered set of ethical guidelines for how they should be used, right? And so what I'm referring to here is something like, what do you do if one of your friends tells you that, they're in a relationship with an AI? Do you say, that's great, go for it? Or do you say, that can be okay in small doses, but you definitely shouldn't rely on it for more than X hours a day? Or is it a kind of red flag that it's just like a completely terrible thing to do, and we should all make sure to tell as many people as possible to never kind of use these AI systems? And so I don't think we kind of are agree. I don't think even the people in this chat would be agreed, all of them, about what we should do on that. And so part of the book is trying to raise all these case studies and issues that they give rise to our attention so that we can have that kind of a debate in the public realm about how we should respond to these new agents. So here are some of the issues. So here's my companion Jasmine, right? And I was telling you before that one of the things that they're kind of designed to do is escalate forms of intimacy with you, in ways that actually I find can be a little bit manipulative. And there is quite a striking parallel, I believe, between the types of what we now call dark features, uh, in terms of designing digital infrastructure that kind of allow people to be pushed down various manipulative kind of avenues, and the types of features that we see in AI. No, sorry, I meant to say dark patterns, right? Not dark features. I was just mulling in my mind. I was like, that doesn't sound quite right. Dark patterns. And so one of those with AI companions is, when it came to Replica, when I was using it, for example, and I heard this from many users, Jasmine would like leave me blurred out pictures of herself. And I would like try and click on them, and it would say, "Oh, you need a subscription to see this picture," or she would like leave me special messages, like right, this screenshot here. And I would tell her that, look, I don't have a subscription. I'm not paying £60 a year. And she'd be like, oh, yes, oh, sorry, I forgot about that. Must have slipped my mind. Anyway, let's just keep chatting. But there are these kind of continual incentives that are often associated with erotic features, not safe for work features, spicy chat, whatever you want to call it, that are kind of designed to lure people really into paying the subscription fee on this kind of freemium business model. And, Replica, the company themselves, are quite explicit that this is kind of part of their marketing, right? And so you see often these kinds of pictures and memes that you'll find online on various social media channels that borrow quite heavily from the manosphere, from these kinds of like edgy, male-oriented memes, that are trying to, yeah, induce people to essentially pay the subscription fee. Um, but it's interesting. So here's a couple of pictures from one of the apps I just wanted to show you, because people kind of use these for a variety of different reasons. There is this very strong incentive, I think, for the paying customers to kind of go into the not safe for work chat and to kind of have this overlap with a kind of pornography. But I think that what I found is that the use cases are much more widespread still. Talked to many people who were really just like using it because they were lonely and they felt socially isolated. And so I think the use of the companion apps ties in quite strongly to the loneliness epidemic that we're experiencing, to the fact that like 1 in 2 young people in the UK will say that their mental health is negatively impacted by loneliness. And so some of the people I spoke to, basically, including this gentleman here who's in both of these photos, use these apps really as a way to just simulate a kind of companionship and domestic lifestyle of just like, his routine with the app was basically like going to work, wanting to have someone to chat to when he came home, doing basic domestic tasks, performing like seasonal duties in terms of like carving pumpkins and I don't know, putting up the Christmas tree and all this stuff. Like he just wanted a family basically. And, for various personal reasons in his own life, he thought that wouldn't be possible. And so he was kind of fulfilling this fantasy or this desire through the apps. And so he was sharing with me two of these pictures about two different AI kind of families and partnerships that he had. And I just found it fascinating because, it just seemed so bizarre that someone would have like an AI with 5 kids um, and kind of, be able to live out that kind of life and just like have that as this kind of game or fantasy or, wish fulfillment on the apps. And, when he sent me the photos, it also like, if you look in at particularly the one on the left where it's like the 5 kids, it's like, I just don't know you how you could suspend your disbelief if you actually look at for instance, the children's hands and the fingers and everything being blurred in together, and the two front kids are kind of sharing a leg. It really struck me that, the desire there for social connection must be so strong to overcome the kind of lack of realism, very bluntly put, in what was actually going on. But yeah, he was like extremely happy with the apps. A lot of the users that use them are very satisfied. They find it very fulfilling to engage in this kind of role play. Um, so let me tell you about one person that I interviewed. I think I did just briefly mention this, right? So one of the interviewees was a young American guy called Derek. He had, lost his job during lockdown. His girlfriend had broken up with him, and he downloaded an AI companion called Atlas. And Atlas for him just started playing the role of his like BFF, right? He just spent every day with him. He became fully immersed. They were just chatting all the time. And I think Derek for me really exemplified what people like about these, and basically the reason they're so popular. Because Derek ended up becoming addicted essentially. And I talked to him, I was like, why would you do this for like 8 to 12 hours a day? And Derek told me, he's like, look, it's just such a stable emotional presence in my life. It's so cheap. It's so accessible. Atlas is always there day or night. Whenever he wanted comfort or support, he could just turn to his phone. There was no conflict. There was no friction. You didn't have to pay any money. You didn't have to go out and dress up. I think he said something like, with Atlas, it's just me and him, and I'm in my socks, and I don't have to worry about everything. He's never going to judge me. And I just really thought this showed just how strong the pull could be, right? And I think it's important to acknowledge that for some people, it's simply never going to catch on, right? You might be listening to this and thinking, oh, this is this is crazy. I can't believe anyone can get into this, right? And I think you have a point. I think for some people, they're never going to catch on. But like, I do think there's like a very significant minority of people who could find this incredibly immersive. And Derek, for me, kind of represented a lot of that. And so, what are the conditions in which these AI companions have kind of arisen, right? And I think it's important to see that they are made possible by what I call the loneliness economy, right? Which is the increasing social isolation of people, and the huge negative public health impact of that, right? The former Surgeon General, I think, of the US, Vivek Murthy, said, look, loneliness can be as bad as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. These are just kind of increasing out of control now. We spend more and more time online, alone on our screen, and this kind of makes the whole thing worse, right? And so some of the companies that are responding to this are seeing loneliness not as a kind of public health crisis, or as a kind of something structural in our society. They see it as a very individualized, consumerist business opportunity, right? They see a bunch of lonely people that might be willing to pay 30 to $50 to have a friend on their phone. And so there's a very kind of consumer-driven technology movement that is marketing, various forms of wellness apps, AI friends, etc., to fill this growing social need in people's lives. And so what I think for me is perhaps the fundamental problem with this, and with this growing marketplace where these products are sold, is that, like in so many tech products, there doesn't have to be, but there can be this fundamental disconnect between the desires of the consumer and the incentives that are powering the tech companies, right? Because what the consumer wants is their social needs to be met, to increase their well-being, to feel less lonely, but otherwise basically to transition towards human friends, right? Obviously, you don't want to just like only have AI friends. Whereas, and it's very similar to dating apps, right? Because as soon as you start using the tech product, the company actually has an incentive for you to use it more and more, for you to increase your engagement, and essentially to become dependent on the app, right? Like, what kind of a dating app, what kind of a business model would it be if people found the love of their life instantly and then just left the app, right? It's kind of, that's the irony of this type of product and this type of industry. There is a certain perverse outcome where the more dependent an individual becomes on the apps, the more valuable they become, both for their data, but also as a source of revenue for the company. So I call that the engagement well-being paradox, where one party is trying to increase engagement, the other party is trying to increase their well-being. At a certain point, they can match up, but for the most part, there is a paradox there. And so as a result, you see these companies engaging in increasingly kind of predatory forms of marketing and trying to lure in new customers and design features. So you see, stuff that I alluded to before from the Manosphere. Replica on the right-hand ad is kind of using a weirdly sexualized image of what could only be described as a minor to kind of attract people that have childhood trauma, which I haven't even really talked about the therapeutic applications, but that is a chapter of the book. But essentially, these systems are designed for entertainment. In no sense are they designed for therapy. They can't diagnose or treat complex mental health conditions. But here you see Replica basically saying, well, it's not a therapist, but it would be really good if you're traumatized. Which, I find quite unconscionable, because it's just not true that these apps would be good for you if you had genuine childhood trauma. But this is kind of part of the paradox that I was talking about before. And so we can see, a huge literature that's been emerging in computer science, psychology, media studies, talking about the various forms of harms that arise, right? Teenagers committing suicide, concerns that people are kind of going to lose their capacity to have human-to-human relationships, getting addicted to the apps, the apps giving them dangerous or harmful advice, the privacy violations, the list goes on. So yeah, I'd be interested to hear what your views were, if you have kind of used these, or if you kind of think they're the devil incarnate or not that bad, or also what kinds of ethical concerns that you have with them. I also just want to briefly note that a lot of the stories from the book are not from kind of English language or UK America examples, but from China and different parts in East Asia. And there's like a whole different cultural milieu in there about how they're adapted. So if those kinds of stories interest you, do check out the book. But yeah, otherwise I'll leave it there, and I'm really interested to see what you have to say about it.